welcome to a brand new episode of the Bull Take Podcast. I'm Austin Hill. With me, as always, is Austin Waiter. And today we're talking NBA playoffs. We've got
Whoa!
quite a bit of developments going on. Hopefully, this episode doesn't drag on too long. But it's been a great postseason so far, and let's not delay any. Let's
Yeah,
get
let's
right
not
into
delay
it
it.
here. We'll start in the Western Conference, and we'll start with that number 1 versus number 8 seed matchup that we had going on, and that was the Thunder versus the Pelicans. And really, the unfortunate circumstance of this one was Zion Williamson getting hurt in the play-in tournament, and ended up not playing a single game in this series. And the next big issue was that Brandon Ingram was kind of banged up, and he did not perform really up to expectations, especially in that elimination game.
No, he didn't. And look, I'll be honest with you. When Zion went down, I didn't think the Pelicans were going to win this series. But
Yeah.
Game 1 of this series was really fun. It was a really close game. And I thought, hey, if Zion comes back, New Orleans has a chance to maybe make this a series. He never came back, and it's really like after Game 2, they just dropped their heads. And yeah, they didn't look good, and that's why when Charles Barkley said they're going to Galveston, Texas, they don't get to go to Cancun.
Yeah, it was a sad performance, and look, this is an exciting franchise that we feel like is on the cusp of something wonderful, with that core of McCollum, Ingram, and Zion, but these guys just can't stay healthy at the same time, especially Zion Williamson. And if they had Zion on the court, I don't necessarily think they win this series, but certainly they could have stayed more competitive.
They at least win a game or
Yeah,
two.
they don't get swept. It's just an unfortunate circumstance to see a team this talented constantly harassed by injuries, really.
Yeah, and you wonder what the future holds there. McCollum's getting up there in age. Brandon Ingram's still somewhat, I don't know what age he is, but obviously you got to make a choice on Zion, what you want to do there, because there's always the rumors of what they're going to look to make a move for. They're going to look to trade him. You got to make a decision there and figure out what you're doing with McCollum, because I'm not saying you look to trade or release McCollum, but he's getting up there. You eventually got to have his replacement ready to go and fill in that slot, because Zion's going to be around a couple more years. Brandon Ingram will. Can't say the same about McCollum.
Yeah, I think the big thing you look at with this team for me is that, like you said, teams looking to upgrade and move. And yeah, I think McCollum's definitely a guy to watch, but you got to look at Brandon Ingram too.
Yep.
Look at what he's done in his time in New Orleans. He's been great, but he hasn't really taken them to that next level yet. And obviously, not having Zion is part of that issue.
Yeah.
But I will say this much: Brandon Ingram's on the cusp of 30, getting close to getting that last probably big contract of his career. And it's time for New Orleans to start deciding, do they want to pay a big contract? And if not, I think it's time to at least start looking to maybe move on. But yeah, this team's got to find something, and health has not been on their side, certainly. But we look at this Thunder team. They're young, they're inexperienced, and yet it did not matter. Look, I get it. They didn't match up with the most talented team in the Western Conference. They didn't match up with the most experienced team in the Western Conference, but there were some solid players on this team, guys that have been in the playoffs before, guys that have been in the big games, CJ McCollum and Brandon Ingram especially, and they went out here and they got the job done, and these young guys are getting it done, and maybe experience comes back to bite this team at some point, but right here, right now, it doesn't seem to matter, and this team's talent is certainly above the experience level.
Oh, absolutely. And the big thing with them after Game 1, my thing was, now, that way that Game 1, how close it was, they got the win. How will they use that in the remainder of the series? And they used that kind of as a building block after that Game 1. I think maybe it was just once they got that one game under their belt, they're like, okay, we can beat these guys.
Yeah.
We were nervous in that first game, and we still managed to beat them. We're going to be fine. And I think they handled it the rest of the series. I thought they handled it really well. Dort played some phenomenal defense, and regardless of who they play in round 2, whether the Clippers or the Mavericks, no doubt he's going to be locking down either Paul George or James Harden or Luka Doncic or Kyrie Irving in that series.
Yeah, absolutely. And speaking on teams that are hampered by injuries right now, let's talk about these Los Angeles Clippers. And look, it's a 3-2 series. The Mavericks are up, but you talk about it, and all these hypotheticals. If this Clippers team was healthy, what they could be doing, but you just got to get to the facts. They're not healthy, and they're not winning games, and it's starting to become a little bit dire for this Clippers team that really wanted to get the job done here. How do you think they fare against a Mavericks team that's really been phenomenal to close out the season and now into the postseason? Luka and Kyrie making the big plays.
Well, first thing I said whenever I hear it all the time is I see the post was like, if Kawhi was 100% healthy, Clippers would have won this series in 5-6 games. And I'll be honest with you, every time I see that post, I feel like the season's over. Every time I see that post, I'm like, well, was a good run, but we got the hypotheticals coming out.
Yeah.
So
3 years running the hypothetical NBA champions for the LA Clippers.
yeah, good news is that another team has taken that
Yeah.
NBA title away from them. Thank you, Milwaukee. But look, there's a lot of things they have to consider here. Obviously, let's face it, as weird as it say, Clippers have been in this situation before. They played Dallas so many times in the playoffs. Never forget the series. I think 2-3 years ago, they trailed 3-2 heading to Dallas for Game 6. The only thing different, Kawhi went off in Game 6, forced Game 7. And in case you haven't paid a lick of attention to the series, he ain't going to be there to help out. So, but we've seen what James Harden and Paul George can do on the road together. I mean, James Harden in Game 4 was phenomenal, which is a strange thing for me to say because it's not many times I say that about James in the postseason.
Yeah.
He was phenomenal. Paul was phenomenal. Despite them blowing a 31-point lead, they still managed to win the game. But Game 5... I mean, you want to talk about laying the biggest of eggs. I mean, it was bad. I mean, I think I saw P.J. Washington outscored James Harden. I think they said P.J. Washington only played like 8-10 minutes in the game. It's bad. They couldn't have played worse at home in Game 5. I'm expecting them to be competitive tonight in Game 6. I just don't know if they're going to be able to get it done because I feel like Luka and Kyrie, after all the years of fighting with the Clippers, fighting with them, I'm worried that they might be able to get over the hump this time. But I'll be rooting for the Clippers to force a Game 7 that I'll be watching while I'm in Florida on Sunday. So hopefully they get the job done and can win tonight. But they're in some trouble, to say the least, tonight.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I look at this series, and I think if the Mavericks, the way they've been playing right now, they're going to give Oklahoma City a fight if they make it to the next round.
Oh, yeah.
The Clippers, obviously they'd have to overcome some obstacles, but I don't know. I like their chances a little bit less against the Thunder. However, if they do manage to pull out these next 2 games, they will have to be a completely different team, and that might change the way I feel about this team facing the Thunder.
And also a big thing, they have mapped out the rest of this series and the start for the Thunder series. If this series goes 7, the winner of that series gets 1 day rest before they have to play OKC. Oof. That's a very quick turnaround from a grueling 7-game series.
Especially when the other team played 4 games.
Mm-hmm. So I mean, you're virtually screwed. So basically, for Dallas, you want to end it tonight to get the extra days of rest. The Clippers, you don't have a choice. You're going to have to go in with that 1 day rest and play them. But if you're Dallas, you're up 3-2. You realize what's at stake if this goes to Game 7. You need to get the job done tonight. If you're Dallas, Clippers just got to do what they can to force Game 7 and try to beat the Thunder in Game 1 on 1 day rest.
Yeah. Let's pan it over here to another young, feisty team in the Minnesota Timberwolves facing off against the Phoenix Suns. And look, this is going to open up a debate that we're going to get into maybe a little bit more when we talk about the Lakers. But we've seen this postseason the guys in their jobs, and I'm not going to come out here and say that Frank Vogel's a bad coach. I'm not going to come out here and say Darvin Ham's a bad coach.
Right.
But right now, the way the Lakers and the Suns are running is let the stars call the shots and have the coaches, even though they're great coaching geniuses, kind of have them take a back seat to what the players want, and the players' needs are more important. What a pro wants, if you will.
Don't you dare say those disgusting words on this podcast. Do not.
So I had to slip it in. But really, when you look at this, we're seeing teams that have these very talented coaches, and Mike Malone and Chris Finch, coming out here and the game plans that they draw up and the players follow with their superstar talent. Because let's put it like this: the coaches are the head coaches because they are fantastic strategists with the talent that they have. Not that the talent fits into try to fit into a certain scheme necessarily and force that to work. Whereas you get a coach who takes these guys and makes his scheme based on the guys that he has and what he can make happen here. And we're seeing that with the 2 teams that advanced here against the Suns and the Lakers. Teams that have a lot more superstardom, if you will, but teams that are coached better and better teams as a whole. And when we look at this Minnesota-Phoenix series, this just was no contest. Sometimes the Suns kept the games close, but really this was the Anthony Edwards show. And I don't even really, if you've got things to say about Phoenix, I'd happily hear them. But what I think we should be talking about this series is how fantastic the Minnesota Timberwolves were and how they took that NBA league-leading defense into the postseason and used that to shut down the big three out there in Phoenix.
Yeah, I don't know if I said on here last week or I might have. Like I said, give me very early 2000 Pistons vibes.
Yes.
Give me that's my comparison for
Gritty
them.
defense.
Yeah, a great big man in the middle that stops penetration, a great guard who's your leading scorer, some shooters on the edge. You know, I mean, they got KD, but we got Jane McDaniels. I mean, that was the fact. I mean, I'm just saying McDaniels outscored KD in this series. But, no, looking at it with what you said, I think it's an absolute great point. And I'll say my main talking point for the coaches talking about the Lakers when we get to them in a second. But I'm just saying that Frank Vogel walked into a situation where he was not going to win. He walked into a situation where it was the three main guys that you got, which was, I'm not saying it's a bad big three. The problem is, like you said, we're not questioning the talent. It's how well they work with each other. You know, Phoenix, keep in mind, a few years ago, they had a great core with Devin Booker, DeAndre Ayton. They added a point guard in with Chris Paul to come into that roster and kind of fill in that spot for the leadership. And they all played together phenomenally well. They lose one bad Game 7 in a blowout to Dallas, and the Phoenix is just like, okay, we have to go all in and get every single talent. That's not how it works 99% of the time. You look at Minnesota. This was basically the same roster a year ago that was all over the place and just chaotic. Players were punching each other in the face. It was not looking good. But what happened? The coaching came in and made the adjustments. And Chris Finch, I hope you get to feeling better, dude, and you're able to coach in this series.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because that was a hard injury to watch in that game. But, yeah, credit to Minnesota. Their defense was incredible. Anthony Edwards, I don't know if you've heard, he's somewhat being compared to Michael Jordan already. I don't know if you've heard any of this.
I've seen some of it, and I think that as far as his mentality, I can absolutely see where Mike Conley is coming from. That's certainly the mentality that Michael Jordan had in his career, that he was the best player. But that's the mentality you really have to be a superstar in the NBA, is that I'm the best and there's nobody better than me. That's how you come out and shine in the big moments like Anthony Edwards did.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, credit to them. But Phoenix, I mean, you don't have any control of your first-round picks till, I think, 2030, 2031?
Yeah.
You don't have any control over them. You have three star players. I don't know how old Devin Booker is, but two of the three well into their 30s.
Yeah.
You have Devin Booker, who's been around for a while. Who knows how long he's there? And the rest of that roster, I'm not going to lie to you, could be replaced this entire offseason if they wanted to. And that's
what they did with it this past year.
I mean, that's not the good plan to do it. And I kind of blame this on the new Suns ownership because he wanted to go all in immediately. Which, at first, I'm like, hey, credit to him. He wants the fan base to have a great... but you got to know what are the right moves when you're going all in. And I think that's the thing that hurt Phoenix, and it's going to hurt them for a while. And, remember a few years ago how it was like a long drought for Phoenix where, I'm trying to remember some of their fourth overall pick that was a nobody...
Dragan Bender,
yes,
Josh Jackson.
Yes, those guys.
Marquise Chris.
And you're going to have to go back to just some mediocre years where your highlights are, Tyler Ulis hitting a buzzer beater to beat the Celtics in a round game, although that was very cool and great ending there. But it is not looking good for the future of the Suns. And similar to the Nets, they're going to have to learn from the cost of trying to go all in with Kevin Durant.
Yeah, I completely agree. And here's really the big thing you talk about with those draft assets. You'll get a couple years ago when they made the finals, they had everybody was so hopeful. They were like, look, they lost here in the finals, but look, this is a team that's competitive, that has control of its draft for the foreseeable future. They can build through the draft. And, they've got these stars, young stars, they've been drafting well. And all of a sudden, like you said, they went all in, and I get going all in. But when you rip out that core, Cam Johnson, Mikal Bridges, you get rid of Chris Paul, you get rid of DeAndre Ayton, and you've got one of your top 7 guys left from your championship team, or your almost championship team, I should say. It really leaves kind of a different style, and you can't just mix and match pieces to win championships. No. You've got to get guys that work well together in a system that works well.
Yeah, and it's a process. It's a process to learn that. I mean, look, whenever Chris Paul got traded to Phoenix, no one had any idea if it was going to work. We thought it had a chance to, but it was clear. And, I mean, you watched – I mean, I still remember the sequence in Game 1 with Phoenix against Milwaukee where they were passing the ball around 10, 15 times in one possession. It was beautiful to watch. So it's just a learning process of getting that core correct. And – yeah, Phoenix has got their work cut out for them. I would not want to be their GM or anyone on that staff for the next until 2032, whenever they have control of their picks again.
Yeah, bad situation for them all around. We look at that Nuggets versus Lakers matchup, and look, this was an exciting chance to see kind of a rematch of last year's conference finals. And, could the Lakers come out and be a big surprise against the reigning defending NBA champions? Spoiler alert, they could not. Look, let's be honest, this team has gotten worse and worse since 2020 when they won the NBA title, the Mickey Championship. But
you heard it here first. You heard it.
But regardless, I mean, look, I'll just say this much about 2020. We see how much playing in front of fans at your home court really means in the postseason since then. It's a lot easier to win when, there are no outside effects.
You want another example of it? TJ Warren bubble. Where's TJ Warren now?
Yeah.
Where is he? Because I thought he was the greatest basketball player of all time for 2 days in the bubble for the Pacers.
He looked like the new Pacers superstar.
He truly did. And now I couldn't... Is he even in the NBA currently? I can't even tell you.
That's a really good question.
I'm actually going to look that up right now.
I think he might be a free agent.
That would not... I want to say he originally, after the Pacers, he went to the Nets for a bit of time. But I don't know if he's still with the Nets.
Jazz.
Is he on the Timberwolves? He's on the Timberwolves.
He's carrying the Minnesota Timberwolves for the postseason. We're sorry, TJ Warren. We completely forgot you were the superstar on this team. What are his averages? Sorry, everyone. We're getting sidetracked.
I brought up. 3.7 points, 2 rebounds, 0.8 assists.
At least he's shooting decent from the field. That means he's capitalizing on most of his opportunities.
His last 10 games, he's played in a total of 3 games with an average of 6 minutes. So, Again, that tells you from the bubble. This man was dropping 50 points, and now he's, I guess you could say, a role player on a Minnesota Timberwolves team. I guess you could say that. So, that shows you itself right there.
But biggest issue with the LA Lakers is obviously that they keep they try to flip the roster every offseason, and unfortunately, when you play worse and worse every offseason, and you're carried by LeBron and AD, it's so hard to turn players into value. They have no draft capital, so they can't really flip that into anything.
No.
And so they're just in a really, really, really bad spot all around as a team, and man, it's put them in a bind, but we see what makes the Nuggets so great, how well they play as a team, and what made them champions last year. This is going to be an exciting second-round series. This very well could have been the conference finals. This could have been the NBA finals.
I'm not to be mean to the Thunder, Mavericks, or Clippers, but to me, this is the Western Conference Finals. Yeah. To me, this is. But for the Lakers, look, I'll be honest with you. This was the most fun 5-game series I might have watched in a long time. It was awesome to watch, 5-game series. But look at it. For the Lakers, we always talk about it. LeBron, AD, I don't know if it's still true, but remember over a year ago, the rumor was that they were at least half of the salary cap for that team.
Yeah.
And I'll be honest with you, they played good in this series. They played good. Denver, I'll be honest with you, Denver played like crap. Denver did not play good in this series. The Lakers had a double-digit lead in 4 of the 5 games at halftime. They were in control and in almost every single game. But what it came down to at the end was that championship DNA on the roster at the very end. Like I said, Denver did not play great, but they used their championship experience to get back in those games. And whenever it came down to late and the clutch moments, the clutch player Jamal Murray and Nikola Jokic stepped up and helped Denver win the games to win this in 5. But you look at the scores and you look at just solely on some of the stats, you would have thought this was a 6 or 7 game series, but it ended in 5 games. And of course, obviously, you're going to add in Darvin Ham. Unfortunately, paid the price for that.
Yeah. He was fired. Was that today that he got?
Literally maybe 3 hours ago.
And kind of similar to Frank Vogel. I think Darvin Ham, he had been one of the more exciting assistant coaches out there. On the coaching carousel.
Wasn't he with the Bucks as an assistant?
Yeah,
before?
He was a Bucks assistant.
That's what,
he was exciting. People wanted to get their hands on him. Lakers get their hands on him, but I think we said this when this happened, or maybe I did. Maybe I'm just lying. I don't know. So long, 2 years ago. So somebody wants to go back to listen to the episode we talked about this 2 years ago.
Let's find out.
I think I stated exactly what I was worried about. I was worried that this wasn't gonna. It was gonna be like Frank Vogel when Frank Vogel was there. This wasn't gonna be letting Darvin Ham be the great coach that he is. This was gonna be doing what LeBron and Anthony Davis and Rob Pelinka wanted to do, and not what Darvin Ham and what Mike Budenholzer did so great in Milwaukee, that the stuff that he learned there to be able to bring that to the Lakers, and really that's what happened. They gave him a bad roster and told him to follow their commands, and then he's the guy that gets the finger pointed at him. And I think that's just a bad way to run a team. And I don't know why there are guys that flock to these jobs, and there aren't anymore. That's why you see guys like Frank Vogel, who really wouldn't be a coach in the NBA in today, with just kind of his recent performance as a head coach. That's why they flock to these jobs for these super teams now, is just because the big top coaching talents don't want to coach these super teams because they won't be coaching for these super teams. And that's kind of the way that these big franchises are killing themselves right now.
Yeah. Look, and I'll be honest with you. I'm not saying Darvin Ham was the best coach. I'm not saying he's the best coach in the world, but let's keep in mind this Lakers team was a 7 seed last year. Well, had to play in the play-in, get a 7 seed, and make the conference finals last year, where they lost to the eventual NBA champions. You play in round 1, you're in the play-in again, but you get set up with the eventual defending NBA champions in round 1. It's not like they're playing pathetic excuse of team. They're playing the top team in the NBA what's been the last 2 or 3 years. And I'll be honest with you, he had them playing competitive as competitive gets there. And look, there were some late decisions you can question him, but I'm saying that he didn't deserve this. He did not deserve this. And I'll be honest with you, the one who I just keep on coming back to in these situations is 2 things. Number one, I saw a stat today for LeBron. 4 titles he's won, which is impressive, obviously. 6 NBA head coaches fired. What does that say? And, I saw a perfect example of it, in the, I'll just bring it up in the Jordan and LeBron debate. When Jordan, keep in mind, who was the coach before Phil Jackson, Austin? And with the Bulls?
I barely remember. You're just going to drop it on me.
I'm trying to remember. I already forgot his name.
Now we're in trouble. That's on me. I should know this, but I don't remember.
Doug Collins.
Doug Collins, yes.
Yeah. Doug Collins. What did he do that entire time with the Bulls? He just gave MJ the ball and let it work. And the Bulls GMs and staff realized, we're not going to win an NBA title doing this. We need to bring in a coach who has an offense and has a game plan. And nowadays, I don't think it would have worked out the way it did. But Phil Jackson basically told MJ, he's like, listen, I'm not worried about you, but we got to work in ways to make everyone work and work as a team. And MJ bought into it. He didn't try to say, no, this is my team, this is how we're going to do it. He bought into the coach's system and said, okay, I got you. Let's run your system. And I think that's an overall difference there in the 2 right there. Is one's willing to buy into a coach's system, the other's truly not. So that's a debate. And number 2, I'm so sick and tired. I keep on hearing about how great of a GM Rob Pelinka is. I am so sick and tired.
Somebody saying it.
I am so sick and tired of hearing it. He was Canada's a great GM for the moves he made this summer. Jackson Hayes, so many bench guys coming in. And yeah, all these failures the last couple of years, coaches are getting fired, and yet you're keeping this man here who has traded away picks. I'll give him credit. He made one good move. He traded for Anthony Davis, and he won a title in 2020. Good for him. What has he done besides that? That's the question I want to know. So, listen, I'm not saying Darvin Ham's perfect, but I'm saying if he's getting blamed in this situation, Rob Pelinka deserves as much blame, and nothing's going to change in LA until Rob Pelinka's gone, if I'm being fully honest there.
I completely agree with you. I'm going to say this. I said this when Rob Pelinka got hired as the GM. What does Rob Pelinka know about being a GM in the NBA? Little to nothing. He was an agent before he became the GM, and that's it. He was an agent. He was not an assistant GM. He did not work in any front offices. He was an agent, and then he was a GM.
Not many people make that transition.
No. What does Rob Pelinka know about running an NBA team? Hopefully something now, because he's been in the front office for forever. But like you said, he made one deal, and it's for Anthony Davis. And what did he do? He sold the Lakers' soul to make that deal and win a fraudulent championship. That's what Rob Pelinka has done. I mean, look, and besides that 1 year, how really impactful has an Anthony Davis deal been for them?
Yeah.
They've
I
been
mean,
to the
absolutely.
conference finals once besides the year they won. They've missed the playoffs once, and they've been out in the first round this year.
I mean, yeah, I'm with. That's whenever I kept on realizing in these situations. I realized it really about the start of this past year, but I was like, well, let's see what happens this year with all the talk in the offseason. And it ultimately came to us, yeah, listen, you could say LeBron, and I think that's absolutely a fair argument to blame LeBron say he's going to, but Rob Pelinka deserves as much blame as the star players on that Laker team for this situation. He deserves just as much, and nothing's going to change there. You know what's going to happen? They're going to hire a yes man. Probably JJ Redick. He's got a podcast with LeBron. Not as good as this one. But anyway, that I could see him just hiring a yes man for LeBron. They're going to get the 6 or 7 seed, lose in the first round, and we're doing this all again until LeBron retires. And I mean, I'll be honest with you, if I'm the Lakers personally, and I told Austin we were doing it before, I was doing a rebuild of the Lakers on here, I would have told LeBron, it's like, listen, you can take your player option, go somewhere else. We want to start over. We don't, no disrespect, dude, but we want to start a whole new thing here with the Lakers, kind of like they did in the 90s. Reset the roster, led to them getting a Kobe Bryant, getting a Shaq, making those big moves, not trading, but making the right moves to make their team better for the future.
It's what they did in the 70s to get to the 80s.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's a cycle that needs to repeat in LA. You're a massive market. You're the biggest market in the NBA. You're going to get superstars when you're ready. But what needs to happen is this team needs to rebuild. Look, Wilt got old. Jerry West got old. Elgin Baylor got old. So what did they do? They landed 2 number 1 picks, got Magic Johnson and James Worthy, and made a massive trade to get Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. And then when that time started to run out, what did they do? They made a fantastic draft day trade to get Kobe Bryant.
Yep.
They made a phenomenal signing to bring in Shaquille O'Neal, who was unhappy in Orlando, and built a team around them by drafting and trading well. It's time to start over again.
Yeah. And another one, you add along with that. After the Shaq thing fell apart, Kobe Bryant's there for the whole time. They draft and they trade guys to bring in. Pau Gasol, remember that trade?
Andrew Bynum.
Yeah, Ron Artest too. I mean, guys they brought in that led to more titles. I mean, yeah, I'm with you. I don't know why they got to restart that process. Because keep in mind, after Shaq left, the Lakers were just the Kobe show for 3 years. They were not a competitive team in the playoffs. So, yeah, they need a full restart here. The second they do that is them heading in the right direction. And I don't know when they'll do it, but when they do, it's when I'll finally say, I'm interested to see what the Lakers do. Besides that, I have no words. They're screwed.
I completely agree with you. Let's take it over to the Eastern Conference now that we're off our little tangent. And the 1 seed, Boston Celtics, get the job done against the Miami Heat. Now, I think we saw this coming. I think even with Jimmy Butler, I think the Celtics probably still get it done. It would have been a lot more fun with Jimmy Butler.
Would have been a lot more entertaining, but yeah.
Would have given me something to cheer for in this game because I really just don't care for the Heat. I don't care for the Celtics. I do care for Jimmy Butler, though.
Mm-hmm.
And so Celtics get the job done. Impressive. This team overcomes maybe the biggest thorn in their side over the last few years in the Miami Heat. Thanks some to Jimmy Butler not being able to play in this game. And look, this is a team that looks good. They're playing well. They had a phenomenal closeout game against Miami.
My goodness.
So look,
ridiculous.
I really like their odds against either Cleveland or Orlando. But knowing Boston, that's where the wheels really fall off.
Yeah. Look, I mean, once Jimmy Butler went out, I'm just heartbroken we didn't really get to see playoff Jimmy. I mean, we technically saw it in the Sixers game where he got injured and then went insane, but it ultimately cost him the rest of the playoffs. So, Boston just ran through them except for the one game in Game 2 where Miami, I think, made 24 or 25 threes, which is very hard to beat a team that makes that many. And then Game 5, the ultimate turnaround, they shoot 3 for 29 from 3. So it's a lost year for Miami. Again, because, look, after what happened last year, we felt like that roster was building towards something. You got to remember, they lost Gabe Vincent, who was a key part. Jimmy Butler goes down. And now, you hear all the rumors about people wanting Jimmy Butler on their roster. So it's an interesting spot for Miami. But for Boston, yeah, they looked good. Their big question is with Porzingis. Remember, he got injured at the end, and he's missing, they said, several games. And I know you said not to worry about the Cavs and the Magic, but you look at Cavs, a lot of size inside.
It's true.
Porzingis not there. Remember, they don't have Robert Williams anymore
To
go in there. And for the Magic, they're just an overall incredibly tall lineup in general. So I still think they'll beat either one of those teams. But if Porzingis is out for the first couple of games of these series, one of those two teams is going to give the Celtics a pretty good fight.
That's true. They might be cheering for the Magic tonight just to extend that series, give them a little bit more time.
Exactly. I'm rooting for it too, so I can hear the song played. So
yes, I want to hear the song as well. It's stuck in my head. But speaking of Cleveland and Orlando, let's head to that matchup. It's a 3-2 Cleveland Cavaliers lead right now, and this has been a really fun series between two teams trying to make a name for themselves. But I've been pleasantly surprised with the Orlando Magic. I thought maybe a 5 seed this quick might be a little in over their heads, but they've shown that they can, in the right circumstances, really show themselves and hold their own. And man, I've just been impressed. For Cleveland, I think this is more of a disappointing series for you. This is a series that, this is a team that they got Donovan Mitchell. They've been trying to make themselves legitimate in some of their moves and make themselves feel like a real contender. And this is a series that I think a real contender gets done in 4 or 5 games. No offense to the Orlando Magic. I think they're a great team, and clearly they've shown that. But I think a more legitimate team gets this series done faster. So I don't know. I think it's been a bit of a disappointing run for Cleveland, and I think it's really been a kind of an eye-opening run for Orlando.
Yeah, I mean, look, games 1 and 2 went exactly how I thought they would. Cleveland ran through Orlando. It wasn't a game at all, and I was saying, I'm like, this makes sense. Cleveland, after last year, they learned their lesson from last year. Orlando, this is this young core's first time in the playoffs. I'm like, this will be a sweep, but it's something Orlando can learn from. Then games 3 happened. I remember me and you were watching the draft that night.
Yeah.
And then I just said the score, and me and you looked at each other like, that can't be right. Are we rubbing our eyes to make sure it's right? And game 4, they blew them out as well. So yeah, I'm with you. It was a chance. I thought Cleveland had to just roll in this series. And then game 5, I'll give Evan Mobley credit, a phenomenal block at the end of game 5. But really, that game 5 signified to me that Orlando could win the series, because the first 2 games, it looked like they looked like they didn't belong. The next 2 games, they looked like they were a team playing at home during the regular season, like a young team using the crowd. Game 5 was the first one I looked at and said, hey, they played a good game. They're figuring it out. So honestly, I'm favoring Orlando to win the rest of the series, if I'm being honest right now. Because I think that they showed in that game 5 that they can compete in Cleveland. Because I think that was the big thing after games 1 and 2, were how are they going to do on the road there. But they performed well in game 5. So I think they win game 6 tonight, and then I think they have a really good chance to win game 7, whenever that is. I don't know.
Alrighty. Now we're pulling into Excuse Town. Population, I don't know what the population of Milwaukee, Wisconsin is, but
you got me.
It's a lot of people. A lot of people making excuses, too. The Indiana Pacers move on against the Milwaukee Bucks. And look, I'm not going to downplay it. Certainly, injuries had an effect on this series. But the Pacers just had the upper hand against the Bucks pretty much all season. I think that's evident enough by the record coming to a close at this season. But it doesn't matter whether players are hurt or not. You've got to play with what you've got, and what happens, happens. I mean, we can't sit here and say, oh, this team, oh, they're bad. Oh, they're in the playoffs. They made it without having to go to even play a play-in game. And they got the job done against Damian Lillard and Chris Middleton and Brook Lopez. I mean, we're talking about a bunch of guys who helped win a championship just a few years ago, and Damian Lillard, who is a perennial top 10 guy.
Yeah.
He's a guy we're constantly talking about as one of the top players in the NBA added to this roster. And it's not like Damian Lillard doesn't fit with this team. He fit really well with this team this year.
Right.
Look, you caught a couple of bad breaks, and the Pacers took advantage, and that's just what happens. But very impressed with this Pacers team. They came out and they took advantage of their opportunities. Look, they saw a team that had some injuries against them, and they went out and they gave them everything they had, and Milwaukee just couldn't handle it.
Yeah. As a Pacers fan, I quite enjoyed this series. It was, now I'll be honest with you, game 1 and 5, I didn't enjoy. But I'll be honest with you, game 1, that was tough to watch, and that kind of made me realize, maybe we're not, maybe wonder. I was like, maybe we're not ready for the moment, and Dame is just going to be playoff Dame. But game 2, 3, and 4, I saw this team grow up very, very quickly. Game 2, I sort of saw, but I thought they would at least steal a game in Milwaukee. But game 3, that was a whole other situation where I was kind of wondering how are they going to step up and win at home in that home crowd. And credit the man himself, Tyrese Halliburton. The legend continues to grow. But I'll be honest with you, after Game 5, I was very concerned because in my head, when I was getting ready for Game 5, I was like, we got to lock in for Game 5 and finish it tonight, because if we let it go 6, Damian Lillard or Giannis is going to return. And I'm like, if one of them returns and this goes 7, I don't think we got a shot.
Yeah.
But credit to the young guys. They stepped up in that Game 6, and they truly dominated from the get-go. Shout out to TJ McConnell. I hated you so much in Game 5, but, sir, Game 6, TJ is now a thing. And also Obi Toppin. Those two guys were phenomenal off the bench. I believe it was 41 of our 50 bench points were from those two guys. So, yeah, credit to them. And Rick Carlisle, I hope you learned a valuable lesson in this series. The big thing I saw, I don't know the official rotation because the game was just last night, but games 1 and 5 had an 11-man rotation the Pacers were running. Games 2, 3, and 4, 8-man rotations. Get lower rotations. Look, you can't treat this like the regular season and go 5 bench guys out there. You got to have one of Tyrese, Miles, Pascal. You got to have one of those guys out there at all times working with your lineups. That's what you have to do come the playoff time. And he learned that in Game 6. They were out there for most of the time. So, also, Patrick Beverly, you're an Arkansas alum, dude, but I have no respect for you left. I have no respect left for you after the stuff you pulled last night.
Yeah, that was absolutely disappointing. Pat Bev's a guy I love to watch and love to see compete, but yeah, that was a different level of disrespect that we saw, and that as an athlete, you got to hold yourself above that.
Yeah,
that's the point of the pros. Look, I get it. We don't know the full context to everything, but that's not the way you act. And it's not for you to be judge, jury, and executioner. It certainly paints a bad light on him.
Yeah, and then don't forget, obviously, what happened in the locker room after that. I don't know how many people know about that. A girl
Even worse.
Yeah, a girl from ESPN. I can't remember her name, but many ESPN employees said she's a very good reporter, and obviously she's at ESPN. She clearly is a good reporter. And Pat Bev wouldn't answer any of her questions because she wasn't subscribed to his podcast. And that's just a lack of disrespect in itself even more. I don't know. And ESPN's already said that he's banned from any future shows on there for now on because of the way he treated the ESPN reporter.
And I'll say this. I'm all for sticking it to the man, sticking it to big business, sticking it to ESPN and going with the locals.
Right.
But the way he went about it was a little bit disappointing. And, look, and it's really the reasoning and the rationale. Look, it's not because I don't like you or it's not because I'm trying to, speak with the local news station because they were here first.
Right.
It's, you don't care enough about me. Make it all about him, you don't listen to my podcast, well, then you don't deserve the right to be in my presence and to hear my thoughts. And, it was just downright disrespectful to a whole different degree.
Yeah, but he's on his way to Cancun or Galveston, whichever one they want to go to. They're not in it anymore. Pacers are moving on. That's all that needs to be said.
Yeah, and finally, let's get into the Knicks versus the 76ers here. This was an up and down series. The thing that worries me the most about this Knicks team, look, they're a solid team. They played really incredible basketball down the stretch, but this team got sloppy at the end of the games, even the ones that they won in phenomenal fashion. Look, there were a lot of games where this team was leading in the fourth quarter, getting late into the game, where the Sixers somehow would come back and jump into a lead, and whether the Sixers closed it out with a win or somehow managed to fumble it away on their own. The Knicks left a lot of these games a little too close for comfort and kind of lost control at the end of games. If this team wants to go on and win a title and be competitive this year and in the future with this kind of core, I think this is a very solid core and a very exciting team. But to stay competitive with this core and to make a run in this year's postseason, this team's got to do better at closing out games.
Yeah, can I just say this series was a battle, to say the least. It was a physical battle between two teams. And, listen, you can talk about that, working to improve, but the one thing I will say, Jalen Brunson seize the moment. And I say it every time. Want to be known, these two geniuses right here, we believed in the move the instant it was signed. Some of you are like, what are they doing? This is the star player they signed. Are you kidding me? We're both like, this is going to make them a better basketball team, having a point guard like this as starting caliber. But, and I will say they've done a great job building around him, getting Villanova guys, because, Villanova ends up working out really well in college basketball with those guys. So it's amazing what happens when they get to the NBA and play well there. But yeah, credit Josh Hart too. He was phenomenal rebounding. That worries me against the Pacers because, every time it looks like, okay, you got a good rebound, you just see Josh Hart just dive from the 3-point line to save a rebound. So
he's been all hustle, and look, that's the kind of guy he is. We've known that for a long time, but really seeing him be all hustle in the playoffs for this team, it really shows how well this core can work together, because it's not a core of a bunch of superstars, but this is a team that buys into Tom Thibodeau's system and plays into his system, and it's just phenomenal the way they've bought in.
I am interested to see, because obviously Randall's out for the year. I'm interested to see when they play the Pacers in round 2, how will Pascal Siakam perform in that spot and can look to take over. He's the key in that Pacers-Knicks series, in my personal opinion. But for the Sixers, this is an interesting offseason they're heading. They have a lot of cap space. If they're smart, they don't re-sign Tobias Harris, considering he scored the same amount of points that me and you have today. In that game last night. They have a chance to do something, but honestly, they could just look to revamp this roster and build around Tyrese Maxey and move on from Joel. It's a big offseason for the Sixers.
I completely agree. I think this has been the final nail in the coffin for the process. Look, you bought in, you committed, and there was a lot of excitement and a lot of hype. But you've put a lot with Joel Embiid. And I don't think Joel Embiid is a cancer. I don't think he's a guy you can't win with. But I think things have run their course in Philly. Yeah. I think it's time to buy in to Tyrese Maxey, move on from Joel Embiid, and look, either move Joel Embiid in a superstar for superstar move, or get a ton of draft capital and really build around this guy. Look, there's a lot of options for Joel Embiid. And for the Philadelphia 76ers.
There's a lot of teams that would want him as like a 1-2 duo. A lot of teams would.
I don't think he's bad, but I think with him in Philly, I don't even think they have bad blood. Yeah. I just think that this is a situation that, look, Embiid is almost 30 if he's not already in his 30s.
His knees are at least 60 plus.
His knees have been in bad shape for a while. He's injury prone. We saw Tyrese Maxey take the next step. He was voted the most improved player in the NBA.
Should have been Kobe White, but
I don't know how accurate that was, but he did show improvement. He was a good player this year. I don't want to take that away from him, because he did step up in the moments they needed him to. I think that's enough for me to buy into this guy and commit elsewhere. Look, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe the Sixers are going to win the championship next year, and we'll be all over freezing cold takes for our dumb.
I want to be all over freezing cold takes. That means we did something right here if we're getting that attention from them. So I'm surprised I'm not on it for my horrible Bengals take not that long, a few years ago.
But I think personally, they don't pay me the big bucks to make the decisions, but that's the move that I would make. I think the process has run its course in Philadelphia.
I think it has too. And look, they could go and get a max contract kind of guy. I don't know who's all going to be out there once they get all the player options and stuff done. The only one I think that would make sense is a reunion with Jimmy Butler. Because I'll be honest with you, when he was on that team in Philly, that was their best chance to win a title with Joel and them there.
Yeah.
If they are going to go all in with Joel, I think that's the only move I would look at and say they could probably make that work. The rest of it, I'm with you. They need to restart that whole thing.
I agree. If I was Jimmy Butler personally, I wouldn't go back to Philly. Tobias Harris over me. I think that was a bold decision that obviously didn't pay off. I'd do everything I could to not be involved in that, and I'm sure he's got a massive player, some kind of no trade clause.
Oh, he's got to have something,
So it'll be his call if he ends up moving on. But look, that's going to do it for us here at the Bold Take Podcast. Nice little recap of the postseason. And look, still got a little bit to shake out in the first round, but it's been exciting. Watch those Game 6s tonight. See what happens. Look,
go Clippers.
Game 1, Nuggets and Timberwolves. Tomorrow night, as of recording, we've got tons of playoff basketball. It's been fun. It's been exciting. And look, we're going to have really probably a new face at the top of the league here. Look, what?
No LeBron, no Steph, no KD.
No Giannis. I think Well, I think the Nuggets are the only team that has a superstars that have already won a title.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right. I mean, the only one.
Drew Holiday's won one in Boston, but I wouldn't say he's necessarily the face.
Yeah.
Pascal and with the Pacers.
Yeah.
Nobody on the Knicks off the top of my head.
Yeah. So this is what we call, and I think I saw it. Could be a changing of the guard moment in the NBA you're witnessing right now. So enjoy it. 2 really good games tonight. We'll have an NFL draft episode as well, and then we'll probably be off for the next week because I'm going to Florida. So yeah.
Yeah. But that's Austin Wader. I'm Austin Hill. We want to thank you for listening.